Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes, hotter than pancakes. We're a couple of gangsters just shooting up the town. If this is your first time listening to, you like that, right? If this is your first time listening to Pop-O-Holics, we're so happy to have you. Thank you. Welcome. Come in, grab yourself a seat, have a cup of tea or a beer if you're a beer guy or gal. We don't care. You want a cocktail? Let us fix you up a cocktail. But we're not talking Tom Cruise. We're talking Tarantino this month. If this is your first time listening to the show, we take every month, we theme it around an artist or a film series or an idea or an art, something. We don't even know. No rules, just right. Outback Steakhouse. We're ready for that promotion. We're ready for that advertisement campaign. You know, we do whatever we want here, but we theme our months, and this month we're actually making it a double month special, a royale with cheese, if you will, and we're doing it all Tarantino for the next 2 months. This is exciting. We wouldn't be a bunch of dudes sitting around talking about movies and whatnot if we didn't have Tarantino talk. That's what we're going to call the next two months, Tarantino talk. But it would be boring if you just listen to me rattle off for 2 hours about whatnot and doodads and artists and auteurs. I would be remiss if I didn't have some very special guests. And I have two men that complete me more than Jake Gyllenhaal is completed by Heath Ledger. And that is my special co-host,
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
Oh, so good to be here. And we're back from a little bit of a lull. We've stayed on schedule, but we have been out of the studio for the last week. So it is good to be back. It feels good. I feel like it's summertime. I'm jumping in the pool. I got a mojito. It's great. How have you guys been? How have your summers been treating you so far?
My summer's been well. Unfortunately, I haven't done too much vacationing, but it's been nice. Excited for the 4th of July tomorrow as of this recording. Get a little bit of time off. May try and take Friday as well and have a nice long weekend. How about you, Chris? I know you've been active.
Yeah, I just
sexually
got back from I mean,
well, I hope so.
I'm not gonna speak to that. I feel like those are private matters.
Oh, you dog! You dog! You dog! You! You diggity dog!
I have been active in the traveling scene. I just got back from a week and a half long. That was a terrible transition. A week and a half long cruise with some of my family to Alaska and Canada.
Ooh,
and
fun.
You know, vacationing's a lot of fun, guys, and I got to see a lot of beautiful things, and I enjoyed spending time with my family. But I have to say, it is wonderful to be back talking to my favorite two dudes here on Pop-O-Holics.
That's good to have you. Yeah, I'm excited. We got 4th of July coming up. I'm actually going to be in Tampa celebrating on a lake with some family. So it's going to be a good time. I'm excited. But yeah, it's been a lot of work. I went to St. Pete for my girlfriend's birthday, and we spent some time with some family there. So just been relaxing, other than relaxing and then working, and then relaxing and then working. That's been the tune. I met somebody that was on summer vacation. They were like a senior in high school. And I was like, enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah.
Adulthood soon is upon you.
Can you remind me, what's summer vacation?
I've
forgotten.
It's this insane thing where we're like, all right, we're going to raise children. So for 3 months, they do nothing but play video games and go on Facebook and hang out with friends. That way we prepare them for real life.
Right.
Our American education at its finest. But we're not going to talk about our adventures at home and abroad. We're going to get into the real stuff. And we're going to try a new segment today. We're going to go into Brian's Wacky News Corner.
Extra wacky today, folks. We're trying out something new. So this is a little segment we've talked about a bit to try and keep our listeners, up to date with what we are excited about consuming. And hopefully it works out. Please give us any feedback on the Facebook page.
Oh, I just got an email in, Brian. It sucks. They said it sucks.
Oh, it's already ruined.
Terrible.
Right.
That was so fast.
We
I
haven't
can't
even
believe
put
it.
out the episode. We don't even live stream this. All right, Brian.
This will be cut.
No,
I didn't know it was
Brian.
going to be the first segment. It's really on the spot here, but I love the intro music, which is free source, if I understand correctly. Don't sue us. So I'm going to hop right in with some comics news that are coming out this week. They'll be coming out today if you're listening when this comes out. The Wild Storm, number 24. This is a comic by Warren Ellis, the end of a 24-issue run that he wrote. So, Chris, feel free to jump in here with any information you may have about this, because The Wild Storm was an imprint from the 90s that is involved with a DC, and they had a handful of titles, of which I know Warren Ellis at least wrote The Authority, a good bit of that, and maybe some Wildcats as well, if I understand correctly. So this was ended around 2010, 2011, I believe, and they recently brought it back in 2017 for this run of the Wildstorm. So this is the first thing they've done on this new imprint, and they're bringing all the characters from this realm back. Warren Ellis is writing it with the artist John Davis Hunt, and I've read the first 4 or 5 issues of this. I have a good friend who's been reading it as it's going along, heard only great things, and I'm very excited to continue getting into this. I believe there are a couple volumes out now that you can buy and trade, and this is something that for old school comics people, if you're into it, I'm sure it's very good, and I think it's something that you can hop into without having known the characters as well. And so it pays off for if you're new to the characters or old school. So this is something I'm excited about. Big Warren Ellis fan. He's written some of my favorite comics that I've read in my past. Transmetropolitan, Planetary. He's got a ton of good stuff under his belt. So yeah, as far as comics news, that is the main one for this week. And you can pick that up at all of your local comic shops, which I hope you're supporting, because I believe in that. Physical media is my thing for loyal listeners. They'll know
Support
that.
in some capacity, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And Comixology is great as well, you know. Amazon, it's hard to avoid them these days. So
Give money to the Bezos. He's trying to build shaped rocket ships to space, so you throw him your money.
Let's be honest, they're all shaped. He's not in particular like the one who's making them like that. We're obsessed with dicks over here. It's
not an original idea.
His looks strikingly like it's very phallic. It's a very phallic rocket ship. Google it.
Well, I can't speak to Bezos' psychology, but maybe he's compensating there. So, moving on to some movies, this will be something that a lot of people will probably be aware of already, but yesterday, Spider-Man Far From Home came out, which is the final Phase 3 movie in the MCU. Phase 3? Phase 4?
Yes, sir, Phase 3.
Oh, I thought it was 4 is what's beginning after this.
Yeah, 4 is what's to come.
You'd think I'd know this. We did an entire month where we covered every single Marvel movie that ever came out.
We've blocked it out of our heads at this point.
Yeah.
So we've got Spider-Man, we've got Mysterio being introduced that I am very, very excited about. Jake Gyllenhaal, which has already been brought up today, so very, very relevant. So very excited for that. As of this being put out, Chris and I, and possibly Christian, will have already seen this movie, and we plan to definitely cover this on a bonus episode at some point, so stay tuned for that. Another one that I'm really excited about, I don't know if you guys have heard of this one, but Midsummer. So last year, a kind of sleeper hit out of nowhere was Hereditary by an up-and-coming director, Ari Aster. So this is a movie that is getting a lot of critical acclaim right now. It will be out today as well, and I'm super excited about that. Have you guys heard about this one?
I've heard from the people that have seen it at festivals, I've heard that it's really good.
Yeah, I've heard it's interesting.
That's about it.
I've heard that it's like creepy but kind of funny, and it's got a really unique tone, and that kind of excites me as someone who's not as much of a fan of horror.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that, because I've tried to avoid any trailers. Like I liked Hereditary. I've heard some kind of questionable things about the director himself in terms of his earlier shorts, but we'll talk about that later once we've seen the movie maybe. But yeah, I'm excited for that one. So that one's out today as well, Midsummer. Go and check it out. So back to something we've talked about a week or two ago in one of our Godzilla episodes. Finally, Wolverine: The Lost Trail. Season 2 of the first original Marvel podcast will start to be available on Apple and other services. Woo! And they are going to be week by week. I listened to episode 1 of this like a month ago, and I've been waiting eagerly for more to come out. And it was
I thought you said you were going to support Stitcher, Brian, and jump on that bandwagon.
You know, I went to the page, I was about to sign up, and I'm notorious for signing up for things and then paying for them forever and never canceling my trial. So I was like, not this time, Stitcher. You're not going to get me. So I was able to resist, and I'm hoping to listen along with you guys, and maybe we can cover it together at some point a little later this year. So yeah, that's it for podcast news. Last thing, Chris sent me this article. Gotta credit him. It's from Slash Film. This news has been around for years now. Originally, it was talked about as a movie, but The Sandman, the Neil Gaiman classic run on the Vertigo universe, has been potentially picked up by Netflix to do a TV series. Which, for me, I feel like this is absolutely the optimal way for them to tell this story. With, I think it's 75 issues or so, and they don't know how long it's going to be, but from the news that's out right now, it sounds like it's going to be one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, DC show to date. So I don't know how you guys feel about this.
That is like, it's like Doctor Strange level visuals that they need to get across, even more so, so that's it's a bold move, but I think it'd pay off. It's such a cool, unique thing. I think it'd be unique among a lot of the stuff we've seen on Netflix, among a lot of the shows. I'm excited. I'm super excited. As someone who doesn't want to read the comic book and rather watch the TV show.
You should read it, though.
I'm more than pumped.
They got some big names attached as well, though. So the writer of Wonder Woman, Alan Heinberg, is supposedly on it. Wow. And Neil Gaiman, the original author, as well as David Goyer, are signed on to executive produce, at least currently, because Joseph Gordon-Levitt was tied onto this for a while as a movie. They had some creative differences. I think he's one of the ones that said it was originally should have been a TV show instead of a movie. So I'm really excited. I hope this thing gets made. So stay tuned. We'll keep you in the loop on that.
I think the long-form television narrative is definitely going to benefit this series more so than the movies. But I have a feeling these seasons are going to be short and expensive. So
oh yeah, definitely.
Which I'm okay with. Dude, I'm all for short Netflix series. Make them short. Take all that money and just tell the damn story. And it's okay that it's only like 4 to 6 hours. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis concordantly a la Castlevania.
I was just thinking that.
Wow.
All right.
Right back to Warren Ellis.
That's news. Brian, you did a great job. Brian.
Oh, no, that's not. Okay, now I just feel it was terrible.
Own...
Whenever you have to get applause from your own co-host, you know it's never good.
No, it was great, dude.
It, though. Thanks, guys.
Hey, we just got another email. It's great. Keep it around. That's awesome. Thanks for your feedback, listeners.
Was it the same guy that sent the first email? Did we turn him around on it? Or
it was actually Outback Steakhouse. They said now they're willing to advertise.
Fantastic. Great job, dude.
All news, just right.
All right, let's move on to our quick hits and what we've been consuming. So it's quick hits time. This is where we gather around. We talk about what we've been consuming, what's been affecting our lives. Chris, we're going to start with you. You watched the HBO series The Case Against Adnan Syed, based off of the serial I mean, obviously it's based off the real life thing, but from popular...
The real life events.
From the most popular podcast on the planet, Serial. Based on those events, it's a docu series about that. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I was flying 6 hours to Seattle. I ended up binging this entire docu-series in one go.
Wow. And
I was a huge fan of the first season of the Serial podcast. And that's not to say the subsequent seasons aren't as good, but I definitely, I think, enjoyed the first season most, especially considering that Adnan Syed is still in prison for something that he may or may not have done. So it's a story that's very intriguing, and definitely keeps you coming back for more information. I don't want to give too much away about the docu-series because it is, in some ways, a sequel to the Serial podcast. We get a little more recent information. A lot of the Serial podcast took place between 1999 and 2012, 2013-ish. But this focuses more on like 2015 up to as recently as 2019. So for those of you following Adnan Syed over the last couple of years, you're probably going to be pretty familiar with the events that they cover in the docu-series. But some pieces of information are brought to light within the series that definitely might sway a lot of people that thought that he was guilty. But that's kind of as far as I want to go into it. Definitely recommend it, especially if you enjoyed that first season of Serial. Like I said, I binged it all in one go, and I probably would have done that even if I wasn't on a plane. It was that gripping. So highly, highly recommend.
Yeah, I had started this one night because I really, really do love the series Serial, as a lot of people do. It's a really well put together like crime drama. And, I've had a crisis of heart about all these true crime stories where, my girlfriend loves these, and I'm certainly not opposed to just a really well-told story, especially based on real events with good evidence and a good case to be made for maybe wrongdoing or a problem in our justice system, which I think Serial is kind of what the kind of thesis of some of these is that, and like How to Make a Murderer is kind of flaws in the justice system. However, I don't love the effects of the Reddit inspection community, the independent looking and bothering of people, and it just creates this weird culture around real events where you're making entertainment out of horrific murders that I struggle with for sure. And we had started this, and I just found myself not wanting to revisit this as a form of entertainment, which is definitely something I've grappled with as far as how I feel about it.
Oh, one of the things that I kind of realized through watching the Docu series, and I kind of agree with you, Christian, that maybe we shouldn't be prying into this case and into these families' lives, because the thing that I realized was that if it turns out that Adnan Syed is innocent and he gets released from prison, unfortunately that means that Heyman Lee's family doesn't get the closure that they currently have.
Yeah.
So you're basically undoing a verdict that was unjust, but at the same time destroying these parents who just want closure for their daughter. That's all they want. And even if the closure is false, like if they have imprisoned the wrong person and it's not like true closure, it's still emotional closure for that family. So, someone gains their life, a little bit of their life back, and yet this family is going to be destroyed in the process if that's the case. So it's definitely tough, what side you fall on this thing.
Yeah, I just find it hard to wrestle with, and I'm honestly like kind of over stressing about the story. Like, I don't know, I feel like Serial did it well, and I'd love to hear what actually happens and maybe see a recap. But since since the case hasn't been closed, it seems a little early for me to get invested again in the case. But seemed like it was well made. Sounds good. I watched the first episode. Cool. So that
Brian, have you seen any of it?
I have not seen any of it, and I actually am one of the only people who has not listened to Serial still. So I was gonna ask if it's something that is kind of a recap or not, but it sounds like I should start there before taking into this one.
The first episode is very much a recap, though.
Oh, you think?
From what I got, I was like, I know all of this, and that's part of why I was deterred from continuing. Was the stuff they went into? I felt like I was like, I remember all this from Serial. So
I feel it definitely could have been a recap, but I feel like I benefited from listening to the first season of Serial because they didn't really give you all the details. They more glossed over it just to get you caught up to speed so they can move on.
At least from the first episode, it felt like I didn't learn anything new. And I was like, Serial was a better version of this. So, but that was just first episode. So
it was certainly a more fleshed out version of that.
Yeah. Cool. I'll talk a little bit about what I've been doing. I'm addicted to another game where you mindlessly do the same thing for fake digital items. I have a problem, guys. Really trying to understand a lot about myself. This podcast has been good about me realizing that I have a weird addiction to fake gains and improvements, and I really need to focus on real life more. But I've been playing a game called Dauntless. Through doing this project and some of my music projects, money's scarce as I'm investing more in myself, which I think is great. But the gaming budget is taking a toll, which I think is a net positive thing in my life. So I've been playing some free games. And this one is called Dauntless, and it is free currently on PC and Xbox and PS4. And it is essentially free-to-play Monster Hunter. But I have to say, if you're not familiar with Monster Hunter, you basically hunt monsters. They give you armor that helps you against other monsters and weapons that help you against other monsters. And the cycle continues up the ladder of harder and harder difficult monsters. So it's like an RPG player versus multiplayer competitive against the AI, which is these big monsters. And they're essentially like boss fights in a game. Like it's just boss fights. And I have to say, I've played Monster Hunter World, and I think this game is more enjoyable for me. It's a lot more casual. And as far as free-to-play games go, if you're in a Monster Hunter and you want a free version of it, this is great. This is really fantastic. And the free-to-play mechanics are pretty much all cosmetic, and it's published by Epic, so they have a similar seasonal pass that gives you extra stuff. But I haven't spent a dime on the game, and I've probably sunk like 20 hours into it. It's a good time, If you're interested and you got time, it's great. It's a big time sink. After you make a lot of gains, it becomes very much like, well, I have to do the same thing 100 times to get another piece of loot. Again, that pyramid of free-to-play loot games. So I'm very much in the tip of the pyramid where things are very hard to come by. But man, for free game, like free games now, and if I was playing games when I was like 15, someone was like, you could play this for free. My God, what a time to be alive. Just like
for 15-year-olds.
I'm telling you, or 20 or 28-year-olds who are broke. It's crazy to me that there's this quality of a game. The graphics are fine. They have this cartoonish Fortnite-y vibe, and the story is nearly non-existent. And all you do is hunt these monsters. But damn it, free games, man, they're good now. I'm
20 hours of fun is hard to beat for free.
Yeah, and so I give a lot of credit to the developers for making it. Hopefully, it's financially stable for them. It seems to be regular updates. It recently came out of a beta phase. It's good stuff. So I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It really was me being very bored looking for free things to do on a PlayStation that I stumbled upon this, but I was pretty happy I did. So if you're not aware and you're bored and are interested in what Monster Hunter has to bring, Dauntless. Download it for free. If you don't like it, just delete it. Who cares?
That's a great commercial for that game.
I'm telling you. It's like,
if you're bored and looking for free games, download Dauntless. And if you don't like it, well, just delete it.
Yeah, and if I spent $20 on it, I still wouldn't be mad. So I think there's inherent value. I think it's a pretty good free game.
That's awesome.
In a sea of bad free games, this one's a pretty good one. Cool. So that's Dauntless, available for your gaming console or PC. Not available for Mac, though, so shame on them. Develop it for Mac. I wanted to play a little bit and see how it ran on my iMac, and I haven't boot camped my computer yet, so a little disappointed I couldn't do that. Epic. Come on. Mac gamers. It's a thing. And I want to move on to something that, I'm not this guy. I don't know what's happened, guys. Maybe it was
I don't know what's happened. What happened while I was on that cruise ship?
Who is this?
Maybe it was all the Godzilla, but I wanted to watch an anime. I don't know what came over me. I was like, I want to watch a little more Japanese culture. I'm in the Godzilla mood. I just had my fill of American Godzilla, so I'm pretty good on that front. Maybe we could go back and have a little more Japanese culture. And I stumbled upon a series, a brand new anime that started in April. It's based off a manga. It's called Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba. I don't even know what that means. The latter part. I've watched. I think I want to say there's about 14 or 15 episodes at this point. New episodes come out every Tuesday, available on Hulu. And this is a Japanese anime about a young boy whose whole family gets murdered. I'm going to spoil kind of the first episode. And his sister becomes a demon, and he has to try to find a cure. And through that, he must become a demon slayer as he tries to find out who's creating these demons and why. And I don't know if I've told you this story, but when I was growing up, I always wanted to write an epic book or movie about kind of the same thing, about a young coming of age story about someone who learns to hunt down the darkness in the night or demonic figures. And man, this show is super cool. It's super anime, but it's got this really gritty kind of Tarantino-esque samurai violence, which Tarantino was very much inspired by Japanese culture and samurai movies. So it's got that slicing off heads, blood spraying up like a sprinkler system going on, but it's got an innocence to it, and it's got a humor to it, but it does have emotional weight, and it's available only in Japanese, and I think the Japanese voice acting is done very well. So it's this kind of mature, edgy adult fiction anime. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or seen it, but man, I'm all on board. Chris, you give me a thumbs up. Have you watched it?
I haven't. I've seen it advertised a whole lot though, the anime and the manga, but I'm gonna dive in now that you've given it the thumbs up. I'm so proud of you. Look at you growing as a consumer.
Hey man, I liked DBZ when I was growing up. No, this is This is like, I don't know. I'm so stoked that I'm into an anime because so many animes that are like, even like Cowboy Bebop, there's certain things about it that turn me off and are hard to watch. And I do like Cowboy Bebop more than a lot of others, but like, you know, the Naruto train and, you know, all these other animes that I find a little silly and gimmicky and definitely really Japanese to a point where just not vibing with it. But this is so cool. I don't know if it's the fact that it's more inspired by Western drama and movies and fiction. It's hard for me to tell because it still is inherently very Japanese, and they do a lot of silly things of him talk. Like there's this idea that I think just gets across really well because it's written well enough, is that he talks to himself about how he's going to overcome a difficult situation. And the Japanese are much more forward with someone thinking out loud, which is something you can see in Western narrative, like in books. Somewhat you can read people's thoughts, but for some reason we are afraid in Western fiction to have someone like thinking out loud to where the audience can hear. And so I think
like Sherlock Holmes kind of working through a problem out loud.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this does that, and sometimes it's silly, but ultimately that's about as weird as it gets, like awkward. And I'm really digging it. So I'm excited for you to watch it, Chris, and see if you're like, no, this anime sucks, dude. You're into the bad anime. But I've talked to a couple people that I know that like anime and have been watching this, and they say it's good as well. So that is
sweet. I'll check it out while I'm traveling next week.
Yeah, Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, and that's available on Crunchyroll and on Hulu. So check it out. Brian, what you've seen some movies, been reading some comics. Tell us what you've been consuming.
Yeah, so last week I went and saw Rocketman with my mom. This was something that she had actually told me she wanted to see, and she has a movie pass. I got the AMC one, so we've been trying to get our money's worth these days. This movie, I really can't recommend it highly enough. Stars Taron Egerton, who I think became well known with the Kingsman movies.
Yeah.
Which I've only seen the first one. I really enjoyed that. And I know they're making a new one that's coming out this year or next year. I think it's like a old school prequel one. But this is the Elton John biopic, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it's kind of a frame story where we start with Elton John going to rehab, and the rest of the movie is kind of him talking out his life and reflecting on where he's gone and how he got there, which I think is a really interesting. They don't overdo it with like narration or something, but they come back to him every so often, and it kind of shows he goes into rehab completely in his very flamboyant garb, and as he opens up to the audience and to the group, he disrobes and becomes more of who he truly is as a person rather than the frontward face. And I think that kind of speaks to what the movie's about. It's about performance, it's about stardom, and I didn't know this is probably something this happened in college with me too, where there was all of these songs that I knew and loved that I never knew were Led Zeppelin, and I was like, oh, okay, I love Led Zeppelin, like I love all these songs. And so similar here, half these songs I knew but never knew were by Elton John, and he performs Edgerton performs all of these songs. He's got an amazing voice and stage presence, and it kind of takes some interesting artsy turns where it's kind of a surrealist. There's a couple of like surreal moments where it's not exactly what's happening, but it's very much about how music affects you and audiences, and it's a tearjerker. I will say I was very emotionally struck by this movie. I think I don't know if this is something you guys know, but Elton John, one of his good friends, has pretty much been writing all of his music for 50 years. The lyrics to his music. So he's always written the melodies, and he has a writer for the lyrics. And because they're so close, you can very much see how the songs were written for Elton John and are reflective of what he's going through and what's going on in his life. And this is a great movie. Wow. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you have any interest in Elton John at all or love any of his songs, I would definitely say go out and see this one. Have either of you guys seen this yet?
No, but this is a movie that was definitely on my radar. I wanted to see it as soon as I could. Unfortunately, this summer, there is an abundance of movies and a lack of cash. So
it's a great year for movies, I must say, but that's very understandable as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. Erica, my girlfriend, saw it, and she really liked it, especially in contrast to Bohemian Rhapsody, which was kind of a straight paint by the numbers, biopic. And this really sounds like it's trying to do something different, like really creatively, artistically express someone's life without necessarily hitting all the beats of like, oh, they were a nobody, and then they were a somebody, and then the drugs and the drama, and then they recaptured the old flame. And so the fact that from everything I've heard, this movie sounds like it really does its best to avoid those cliches and focus on kind of what makes the artist great and the drama they go through without that paint by the numbers biopic. Because as David Chen has pointed out on the Slash Filmcast, which I super agree with, and I always knew this, but he put it into really good words, which is that ever since Dewey Cox, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story has come out, that movie pretty much has roasted every single music biopic completely, and it's hard to watch anything after seeing that because it is such a finely crafted parody of all of those movies that when you watch it and it's the same formula, you're like, this is Dewey Cox, and it just makes me laugh.
They've nailed that satire.
And to be completely fair, when you did that joking breakdown of the biopic, it's hard to say that that's not what the movie is. But it does do a really good job, and it didn't feel tired to me at all. And I haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody. I know that got, from what I understand, is not as well received critically and with audiences. But this one I really, really enjoyed it, and it's an emotional roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, I
Based
love
on the trailers.
I love Rami Malek is his name. Rami Malek, right?
Yeah.
I love him, but just that movie, he lip syncs everything, and so that's my review of the movie.
Oh, really?
From what little I've seen, I will just tell you that pretty much explains the movie. He just lip syncs, and who gives a shit?
That's a shame.
That's hard. So aside from that, I've been reading Meet the Skrulls, which is a comic that, honestly, I thought there was one issue left to be released, but it turns out it just wasn't at the comic shop when I went to pick this up. So I think the first 5 issues of this are out now. It's by Robbie Thompson. And as loyal listeners will know, my first introduction to Skrulls was in the MCU. So I did not read any comics about the Skrulls, and I'm very unfamiliar with them outside of Captain Marvel. Which I hope is not a spoiler that the Skrulls are in Captain Marvel, but
it's not.
Spoiler alert. So
they're in the trailer.
Yeah, there you go. Fair enough. So this is a story about a family of Skrulls that's living on Earth and posing as humans, and they are actively trying to subvert a program, which we don't know who exactly is running it, but it's called Project Blossom. And this is a program to try and root out and kill all of the Skrulls who are trying to infiltrate Earth because their homeworld has been destroyed and they're trying to find a new homeworld, I think they call it the Throne World. So I am 3 issues into this 5-issue arc, and it's a lot of fun. Having not known about the Skrulls, I think they're using their ability to shapeshift in an interesting way, and there's kind of this espionage, homegrown, spy element to it, which works very well given who the characters are. And there's also family drama. So, some of the children are more adept at this than others. One of them was born on Earth, and because of that has ties to humanity that the rest of the family doesn't, and causes some strife within the family there. And it's just really good. I'm excited to finish this one, and hoping I can find the last issue somewhere before they and it may actually be released in trade at this point already, but this is not super heady, not super deep, but a lot of fun, and has nice cameos from Tony Stark. Like Stark Industries is tangentially associated with it, so it's very much within the Marvel universe.
Very cool. Do you know when the miniseries started running?
I believe it was March or April of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. That sounds really interesting.
Meet the Skrulls sounds like a spinoff, like where the Skrulls are living in a house and they're a family and they don't get along, but at the end of the day they'll find a way. Meet the Skrulls.
Either that or get genocided by the baddies at Project Blossom, which actually may be the goodies depending on who you're rooting for here. I'm still unsure.
I feel like we're gonna get an influx of Skrull material from Marvel Comics here in the next couple of years, solely because the MCU, I think, is going to make the Skrulls a huge part of Phase 4. So, the MCU and the Marvel Comics typically ride this kind of like parallel track where they test things in Marvel Comics to see how audiences respond to it, to see if it'll do well in the film. So I can definitely see why that miniseries is probably being released now.
I'm definitely all for it. Hopefully they don't lean too far into it, because I think it could get kind of gimmicky if you're just like, oh, all of the characters are Skrulls now or something like that. But I have faith in Kevin Feige and where this is going to go.
That's Meet the Skrulls, which is a comic available at your local comic book shop or wherever comics are sold. Let's move on to our weekly poll.
Please don't leave your thoughts on hold. Come on down to a weekly poll. Please don't leave your thoughts at home. Come on down to a weekly poll.
Hey, it's time for the weekly poll. And loyal listeners, this is going to be, sadly, our last Godzilla poll. Or maybe you're really excited that it's our last Godzilla poll because you hated our Godzilla month. Let me tell you, I didn't hate our Godzilla month, but, you know, to each his own. Anyway, I'm rambling now. So, last week, for our final Godzilla poll, we asked our wonderful listeners which Godzilla villain you thought was a better Godzilla villain, King Ghidorah or Destroyah. And here on Pop-O-Holics, we didn't watch the film that Destroyah is in, so unless we've seen it outside of our recordings, we probably didn't have a lot to say about that. Thus, I voted King Ghidorah because he's the villain that I'm most familiar with. And it turns out that 80% of you voted the same way. Guys, what do you think about these results? Do you think King Ghidorah is a better villain? Do you think Destroyah is a better villain?
So I voted for King Ghidorah personally. Like you, I'm unfamiliar with Destroyah in terms of the movies, but I did stumble across something in the last week, which is a kaiju astrology chart, and found out that I am actually a Destroyah, so vote switched. Changed that to 78% or something
Nice.
like that. Vote retracted. What about you, Christian?
This might surprise you, but I actually watched Godzilla vs. Destroyah.
What?
No way. Okay, Christian is the Skrull. I don't believe this.
I didn't watch any more Godzilla movies. We had watched.
I was shocked.
I watched 4 of them. I didn't watch that. I voted for Megalodon or whatever it was. What was it?
Oh, no.
Three-headed
Shark
dragon.
Week.
King Ghidorah, dude.
King Ghidorah, I did. But if I was to choose one winner of Godzilla's most famous entity, it would be this theme song. Guys,
It's never going away.
I'm sad that I've got it. Like, I'm gonna keep it on the soundboard, but I can't. I'm not gonna get over this. This is amazing. I actually might have voted for Destroyah. I don't know. I honestly don't remember voting. But Destroyah had arms, and so I think my biggest thing with King Ghidorah is that King Ghidorah doesn't have arms, which I think makes him stupid. So I think I voted for Destroyah. Plus, his name makes more sense. Seeing Ghidorah, what's that? Destroyah. I get that. What do you get?
Yeah.
What does he do? He destroys you.
I think based on the lore and like what little I know about Destroyah, I think he probably is the better villain, even though I voted for King Ghidorah. So because he's more of a foil for Godzilla, being created from like, what is it? The I've already forgot the name of it. The anti-oxygen bomb that killed Godzilla in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
I mean, like,
scientifically sound, as we know.
right. So I think as far as like storytelling goes, he's probably a better villain. But who's to say?
For those listeners not familiar with our Godzilla coverage, the oxygen bomb, as it turns out, what does it do? It kills fish and Godzilla. It's a fish Godzilla.
Multi-purpose.
Lots of use cases. I know you might be thinking oxygen bomb. Well, that sounds like it does a lot of interesting stuff to the environment. Nope. Just kills fish. And
Godzilla.
And big nuclear reactive lizards. Cool. That was our poll, guys. And as much as we're poo-pooing, I'm poo-pooing. You guys are being very respectful. I am poo-pooing on Godzilla. I enjoyed as I said before, I really enjoyed our Godzilla coverage. I think the episodes were fantastic. Danny was a great guest. And guys, we hit record highs on our listenership. We were over 60 listeners for each show.
Are you serious?
We're killing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
This
Guys,
is news to us, everyone. Christian, he buried the lead here.
We've been growing steadily, and we want to thank I want to take this opportunity that even though I thought I was for sure like we're going to devote an entire month to Godzilla, our listeners are going down the toilet. We've been growing steadily, and it's great that you guys are listening to anything that we cover, and maybe people are into Godzilla more than I think. I don't know what it's showing. But maybe Danny just has that kind of draw. But I do want to take the moment to I appreciate you guys voting in the polls. Everybody listening that's supporting the show, it means a lot to us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, honestly.
This just in, guys. The Pop-O-Holics is now officially a Godzilla podcast.
No. Definitely not. If you guys have feedback on how we can make the show better, I know we're getting a lot more listeners as we go, and so that's really exciting for us. A lot of more unique listeners as well. So please let us know by emailing us at popaholicscast@gmail.com on what you'd like to hear, how wrong you think I am about everything, how you think our hot takes are icy cold and that they need to be warmed up in an oven of some sort. Anything like that, email us and leave us. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a 5-star review. Feel free to leave a comment. We'd love to read that on the show, as well as your emails. If you want to vote in our next week's poll, you can go to facebook.com and search for Pop-O-Holics. We'd be happy to see you there. Chris, what's next week's poll?
Since we're starting our Quentin Tarantino month and a half, 2-month theme, to kick it off, we just want to know what you guys like most about Tarantino's films. Do you prefer his heavy, verbose dialogue scenes? Are you watching Quentin Tarantino for the violence? Let us know. We'll talk about it next week.
I am gonna stake a claim. I'm gonna stake a flag that no one is outright gonna say I like violence.
We already have some votes in that.
We do.
Camp, so
We actually do.
Ooh, I want to hear your comments, listeners. Please, if you choose violence, please let me know where you live so I can avoid you, so that you don't hurt me.
Vote truthfully, though. We're not judging you here on the Pop-O-Holics.
I'm judging you, and if you want to spit in my face, if you vote violence, I just want you to put in the comments why you're a violent person and why violence makes you happy.
Some people might watch the violence as some type of outlet to be less violent in reality. So I mean,
this might come up in our Tarantino conversations.
Maybe
I'll learn that we were the monsters all along. So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to get into all things Reservoir Dogs, our introduction to our Tarantino month, all that and more when we come back on Pop-O-Holics. Welcome back to Hot Take.
welcome back to Pancakes.
I'm Rusty. Welcome back to Pop-O-Holics, show about hot buttery takes, hotter than hot buttery pancakes. We're just a couple of buttery diaper. I don't know what I'm doing there. I had to save that
just
intro.
a couple of butteries just buttering around.
Just buttering around. I should have saved that for when we covered the famous Jennifer Gardner's Butter. A Butter retrospective. Have you guys ever seen that movie, Butter?
No.
I was always fascinated. I'm like, they made a whole movie about butter starring Jennifer Gardner. Count me in. And then I never was counted. So we're back. We're talking, guys. It's we're not talking about butter today. We're not even talking about milk. We're talking about pure, beautiful Tarantino. And we're starting off with his directorial debut, not his first ever produced film. The first screenplay he wrote was one of my favorite movies of all time, which is True Romance. But his first ever made indie film, produced, and distributed by Miramax. And that is going to be the movie Reservoir Dogs.
Put the gun down! Here are your names. Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Pink.
Why am I Mr. Pink?
Who cares what your name is?
Yeah, that's easy for you to say. You're Mr. White. You have a cool-sounding name.
Let's go to work.
Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right.
What happens if the manager won't give you the diamonds?
Cut off one of his fingers. The little one.
I feel scared in case I fall off the chair. And I'm wondering...
That is from the trailer of Reservoir Dogs. Came out in 1992, directed by Quentin Tarantino. Budget of about $1.5 million, grossed $2.8 million, but grew on to be a very cult classic and garner him a lot of success. And it stars Harvey Keitel, which I believe is one of the reasons why it got made. Harvey Keitel as Mr. White, Tim Roth as Mr. Orange, Michael Madsen as Mr. Blonde, Steve Buscemi as Mr. Pink, Edward Bunker as Mr. Blue, Quentin Tarantino himself as Mr. Brown, Chris Penn as Eddie Cabot, Lawrence Tierney as Joe Cabot, and Randy Brooks as Holdaway. This is really cool, guys. I'm so excited that we finally get to talk about Tarantino in a really cool light. We did a Chris Nolan artist retrospective, which you can listen to, and I love covering directors. It was a passion of mine growing up, getting into films, discovering directors and their different styles and their filmography. We're doing a little different this time. We're going to be spreading out the movies piecemeal and going over the majority of his filmography. So I thought we'd start, as Brian, you suggested, with a little history on our history with Tarantino, how we came into him, what we thought of him growing up, and what we think of him now, and what he brings to the table still to this day. So Brian, if it's okay, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I can't remember who recommended it to me. I generally just say it was you for the most part. I feel like in terms of true film, you were very much, Christian, my plug-in to the world of film. And so Reservoir Dogs was actually the first Tarantino I attempted to watch. So we were on a family vacation. My parents clearly didn't know what this movie was or what it was about, and I was watching it by myself. I got to a certain scene in this movie and literally was so shaken that I had to shut it off and didn't come back to it until much later in high school.
Wow.
So it was about halfway through this movie. Those of you that have seen it definitely know what scene I'm talking about. And I had never seen anything like this. So this movie was very affecting to me personally. And I think I ended up coming around to some of his later stuff before I even dug into Pulp Fiction and some of what is considered to be his earliest classics. But yeah, so from the beginning, I knew that this was someone who definitely had a way with film and could affect me on a deep level. So yeah, when I finally came back to Reservoir Dogs, I believe I watched it after having watched Pulp Fiction, and it's very clear how this was building towards that, which I think most people would consider to be one of his best, even though Reservoir Dogs is up there as well. But from the get-go, I love the dialogue. Like, this man, even with horrible, horrible people, you will laugh your way through these movies, and it's something that has constantly stuck with me. And as I get older, with this movie in particular, I feel like every time I come back to it, I always forget just how vulgar and terrible the language is. This one in particular. And hearing...
Oh, you're going to be repeating that the entire time we're going through
I know.
I guarantee that. I guarantee it.
But this one in particular, I don't know. Maybe, obviously, 2019, looking back on things, I can't imagine that this wasn't incredible to people in the moment, how he used racial slurs and things like this just openly and in derogatory ways. And I feel like maybe he's tried to compensate on the back end of his career, given how he treated things a little earlier. But that's getting way ahead of ourselves. So yeah, from the beginning, Tarantino was very impactful to me emotionally, and I've grown to really love him as a director. And now he is someone who I do not miss when he's got movies in theaters. So that's my experience.
My experience with Quentin Tarantino, I mean, I suppose you could say that I came to Tarantino a little late in the game, if like 19 is late in the game, I guess, considering...
It's probably like the most appropriate age, to be honest.
Yeah, I was like,
considering
considering the subject material of all of his films, I would say that's probably, like you said, Christian, like the right age to start watching these movies. But I started watching Quentin Tarantino in my sophomore year of college, when Christian and I were going to film school. And the way in which he frames a story and plays with time and all the music that he uses in all of his movies. And the guy is just like a master when it comes to writing dialogue. Like, especially these earlier films, being in film school, these kind of showed me that it was possible to make indie movies for low budget, right? Great indie movies for very cheap. And that kind of inspired me to move through film school, even though I ended up changing majors at the very, very end. But he's a fantastic director, and I can't really think of any of his films that I dislike, you know? But he, like you said, Brian, he's just one of those directors that has stuck with me and my love of film since I started watching him. He's right up there with Christopher Nolan, you know? And I was a huge fan of Kevin Smith when I started film school as well. Those slacker indie comedies like Clerks also inspired me to be a filmmaker and showed me that, like, hey, you can do this on the cheap. You just need to know the right people and have some friends that you want to make movies with. And Kevin Smith has openly said Clerks would not have happened if Reservoir Dogs hadn't come out a couple years earlier. So like this movie also inspired him to make movies. But I don't know. I'm sure we're gonna praise Quentin Tarantino over the course of the next month and a half.
I gotta also shout out Slacker by and I'm blanking on his name, Richard Linklater, because I think that was another one that I've heard Kevin Smith definitely say he was inspired by as well.
Definitely.
And you said Slacker comedies, and I thought you were actually making the reference, but I was like, okay, I gotta plug this.
Yeah, we can all shout out like early Miramax indie scene. Like, if it wasn't for them, a lot of these movies wouldn't have gotten distributed and made. So, I mean, that they have some classics really in the early '90s. Yeah, I mean, for most people that went to film school and were film nerds growing up, Tarantino, when everybody kind of remembers, except for Chris, the first time they saw a Tarantino movie and it's this whole wave of something very different and very unique that was happening. And it's almost like grown up Kevin Smith, if I can even say that. It is a more mature, more brutally, it's a more violent Kevin Smith, and I think in more mature in a lot of ways, but also juvenile in just the right ways of kind of pointing out the adolescence of men. I think very very cutely, and I think the first exposure, if I'm gonna put a pin on it, that I had was my parents were away like on their dinner night. They used to go on a date night like every Wednesday, and we had just gotten extended cable, and IFC just became a channel. I want to say I was 14 or 15, and they were playing Pulp Fiction, and I watched Pulp Fiction beginning to end. And the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, I shouldn't be watching this. My parents would not be happy if I'm watching this. And it just struck me as I don't think I really enjoyed the nuance of it or kind of a lot of what was going on, but I knew it was special and I knew it was different. And I didn't know all the accolades that it had or the cult status. I was just watching it as a film start with that kind of beautiful fresh perspective and naivety about what you are consuming, and you're just experiencing it. Something very, very special that only happens a few times in your life with something like this. And I remember it was at the closing, like final scene in the diner, and my parents had come home, and I was like, "Oh no, what do I do?" Because it is like a very vulgar scene. And I had put it really low down, and I think my parents were focused on something else. And I remember barely scraping by and just shutting it off because I was watching it in the living room. And ever since then, I remember seeing Reservoir Dogs, and it just being again this next level of you can do this on film, like you can view this, and it's so crazy to think. And this is going to sound terrible, and I hope I word this correctly, but. This is Florida. This is the South. I have a lot of Southern family, and there's a lot of extended family that would use language like this very much like they do in the film, just matter-of-factly. And when I watched Reservoir Dogs for the first time in Pulp Fiction, this didn't affect me like it does now. Like growing up and having moved, meeting a diverse, becoming more progressive and meeting a very diverse set of friends and people that I consider family members, and now watching it's a great arc for me to watch it now and be affected in a very different way of like, oh my God. And kind of a foresight of Tarantino, and maybe we'll get into this in this episode and later episodes, that I think Tarantino actually nailed it, which is that the characters in this speak the way they do, the way that I knew people spoke the way these people did, matter-of-factly. And actually just your own perspective is what colors how blatantly terrible it is. And so I definitely viewed it as like, no, that's how people just talk sometimes, and definitely talked back then in their own secluded corners in their own cultures. And very inappropriately so. And it affects you differently as the viewer, just like the violence, is horrific. And the brutal things you see in a lot of Tarantino films is horrific. And that instinctually, but the casual racism, you grow to understand more, especially if you come from a place that, loosely was throwing around these terms. It now affects you differently. And I don't think Tarantino, just like the violence and the cruelty and the psychopathy and the racism, it's just very matter of fact. And it's up to us as viewers to know the difference and be mature enough to know that, no, that is the human nature. And I think that even struck me younger, not necessarily the racism, but the fact that his characters are so immoral, are so amoral. Not good and bad in different ways. and he just lets these characters be. And I remember being struck by that and trying to understand that as a young man, being like, why is this different? And I think he was revolutionary in film, at least, because we've seen this in literature for centuries. But his ability to bring the Breaking Bad level of an anti-hero in a really real way, that if you do it in the wrong way, it can be very, very different. And he walks such an interesting line. And I think that's what captures his stuff. And as well, I'll stop rambling now so we can get into the meat and potatoes. But I just think captures such a unique, very, very thin line to walk perspective on amorality and humanity.
Definitely doesn't pull punches. We can say that
for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. But you're right, Christian. I think he also allows us to like feel for these amoral people, which is hard to do because, like you said, it's a very fine line, and he does a great job doing it.
Yeah, and it's surprising that he writes dialogue so well. I'm going to link one of his interviews about this film in. The guy can't talk well. It's so strange.
It's hilarious.
He's gotten a little better, but he looks like he's on a speedball and has very weird colloquialisms, and it's just unfathomable that he's that's capable of making film.
His linguistic strengths definitely are only on the page. Like all of his linguistic energies are used to create script, and they're completely wasted when he's giving interviews and stuff.
He's like, if you ever went to film school, he's
like a savant kind of.
You know the annoying people that were like, so I got this great idea. So it's like a bunch of robots, and the robots are all gay, okay? And the men don't realize that the robots are gay. So what they do is they fight with samurai swords in the streets. They have this tournament every day, and so like the main character, you like don't know where he's from, and you don't. And like that guy, Tarantino's that guy, except for he makes great movies.
All we had to do was trust that guy. That's all we had to do. We should have, the moral is befriend that guy and, be involved in his movie making.
But I've never loved an artist so much that when he talks, sounds like he is a first-year film student, but loves film, like with the passion of absolutely adoring the art form, right? And he's got that genuine passion, but all his ideas sound crazy. And then he puts them on paper and somehow makes them magical, right?
It's a wonderful thing.
We're going to be breaking down we're going to be talking about Tarantino all month, so I'm sure we'll have more to say on himself, especially during this and during the other episodes. But we're going to break down what makes this movie unique, and we're going to do this with all the films, kind of break down why this one is different about it, which I do think I can say that no Tarantino film is exactly alike. They definitely have the Tarantino style, but remain unique parts of his career. We're going to talk about his use of time and why this might have been different in the decade that it came out, and his style of film and why it works, and how it tells the plot and builds our characters. And then we're going to talk about our general thoughts and opinions about the film. So let's start out with what makes this movie unique as opposed to other Tarantino films, kind of revisiting this. What stands out to you guys? Chris, if it's okay, let's throw it to you.
Yeah. I definitely think that the budget of this film makes it more unique than the other films, in that we get a lot of like one shots and we don't actually see the heist that they're talking about the entire film. So I think like budgetary restraints ended up lending to the genius of what this film ended up becoming. As far as like other differences, it's been a while since I watched any other Tarantino films, so I'm excited to go back and do this month and a half with you guys and revisit all these films. It's definitely less of a spectacle than say like Kill Bill or Inglourious Bastards. You can tell that those films definitely had higher budgets than this one did. But I think the lack of a budget and his ability to write scenes so well, dialogue scenes so well, made this movie a good film. Brian, what do you think? What do you think is different?
So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying there in terms of budget, and I totally agree that I think it adds to the effect of this movie. So there's really only one or two set pieces, three set pieces or so in this movie, and it's so from the beginning character driven. But the camera does a lot of interesting work, and I'm interested to go into his later stuff to see how much that changes, because I know how he frames things and how he choreographs action and different things like that. has always stood out to me. But the amount of movement with this camera, whether it be 360 shots from around a table just to get perspective to these characters, even some handheld shots that I thought were really cool. In terms of the violence, I think what was so jarring to me at the time, the movie is not particularly graphic. It's bloody, but like you said, we don't really see a lot of the violence. We see the result of the violence, and that in itself is almost more effective. Obviously, we get screams and things like that, and pure psychopathy, as you mentioned earlier, Christian. But yeah, I think the low budget nature of this really forces you to think about what's being said, to try to relate to these characters, and you really get inside their heads and see this situation, and through the storytelling figure out, as they're trying to figure out what happened, you're learning with them. And I think that is a huge element to what's going on here. The timing, the way he uses time to tell the story, and I won't get too far into it because it gets pretty deep into the plot here, but the way dialogue will lead into flashbacks, which I'm not sure how much this was done in film prior. I know in things like Family Guy and stuff, I kind of grew up watching a lot of stuff that's very referential like this, but the way that it's done, and it just throws you into these scenes so quickly, sometimes with the, what is it called when you have the dialogue card, or the card
title card?
The title card, like using the title card, but even sometimes, like, for example, when Buscemi says, I shot my way out, and we just get hopped right back into him running down the street, and the way it can get into these action scenes with no real warning. I think it works so well and keeps you so invested, and this movie is just really tight. I know some of his stuff later on gets longer, and I don't know if that was a budgetary restraint, but yeah, I think this movie all in all works very well, and as you mentioned, Christian, like looking back on it, I think it's just uncomfortable to watch, but I do agree that there are still people today who would talk this way in the privacy of their own homes or within certain social circles. So the way he can present these characters, and in his interviews he kind of calls them heroic, which gets into a little trickier territory of how he feels about the language in particular. But yeah, all in all, it's a standout in his catalog for sure.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, especially early on in the film, is that he uses his camera setups very sparingly. Like he saves the more advanced setups for specific scenes. But earlier in the film, especially before we cut back to any of the flashbacks, it's almost like you're watching a stage play. Like he'll just set up the camera at one location and then let the actors go, just like roll through the scene. So like he'll explain what the framing is. Like that scene where Buscemi and Keitel go into the other room and they leave Tim Roth like laying on the floor to have like a separate discussion. The camera's just set up in the hallway, and like most of the shot is actually behind a wall, and they have to walk into the door frame so the camera can see them. So I think like having such a small budget really helped this movie artistically, because he had to be very thoughtful about where he was placing the camera. He couldn't waste film. But then you also get that awesome long shot in the interrogation with the cop, right? And Mr. Blonde. Like it follows Mr. Blonde out of the building. We no longer hear the music. And then we follow him back into the building. So he's like, oh, I want to do this shot later on. I probably have to be more sparing with film in these other scenes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of restraint. I think this movie's amazing and probably one of my favorite Tarantino movies because it is Tarantino restrained, which we often don't see. He is very unrestrained, and most of his films are 3 hours long. And this one feels like it's 35 minutes long. I mean, I don't know if this happened for you guys, but man, this movie flew. Like the pace. Yeah. It
has excellent pacing.
By far his best paced movie. Tarantino, for all the glory that he has, that hallway shot you're indicating is kind of what he does in every movie, in every scene, and to greater and lesser effect. But I think it's a staple of his, and it's unique. But it is really interesting to see him really having to get to the point a lot quicker. And it may seem like, I remember when I watched it originally, it probably didn't fly by as fast because Tarantino movies, as you've gotten used to Tarantino, you're just used to a guy sitting in a room staring at somebody, a lot of silence, a lot of dialogue. And this movie really feels constrained and to the point, which is something that you don't get a whole lot of in later Tarantino films. And so for that, I definitely appreciate it. I think that alone makes it a very unique Tarantino movie. And like you guys said, the budget, although I will say that, I don't think Tarantino's movies cost as, they don't cost as much as a summer blockbuster. He's still balling in the budget of like the upper, tens of millions of dollars, near $100 million. I'd be interested. I would say Kill Bill is probably his most expensive project. If I was to guess, right. And that's probably 110, 50 mil. And we'll cover that later, but he's not really an expensive director. And I really love seeing, one of my other favorite films is Brick, right? And this feels also like, kind of that nitty gritty down to the last reel of film to get it done and shot and out. But that being said, it like this film is unique because it feels like another director's fifth film. It blows my mind away. We watch this and we go, yeah, it's Tarantino, of course. Clean, great camera work. And like you said, the camera is pretty steady, but when it moves, it has purpose. And it is it is a like a class, like a damn sermon on how you keep things simple but effective. Like it is, it is like it really tickles my film nerd, bone. I don't know. That sounds kind of weird.
Just a single bone.
Just a single bone. You know where it's at, ladies. Watch to watch this. It really is just kind of like it's like his first film, really? It's so crazy. It is so nuts that he was like 20 something making this happen, and like younger than any of us are right now, accomplishing something. If this was his last film, I still think we would be like, what a cult classic that was. Whatever happened to Tarantino? I really think that enough can't be said. So it's very unique in that regard. That it's a great first film, and it's not maybe unique among Tarantino movies that it's a good movie. But unique among first-time directors, like it's very few that are this tight and this good, and this gritty and this revolutionary. I think to have, like I said before, these immoral characters. Certainly not unique among Tarantino films. And then I got nothing more on the uniqueness of it. Anything else, guys, on what makes it special among Tarantino films?
Yeah, I know we'll get into the music later, but that's something that he's notorious for, so I can't say it's unique.
Sure. So let's get into the way that this film works with time and the way that it decides to develop its characters. Kind of what we'll see, again, as a staple of Tarantino, but really revolutionary for film during the early 90s when this came out. What stood out to you guys on this watch?
So I think something that is really interesting, which doesn't exactly have to do with time, but just the character names themselves and how we associate colors with characters as opposed to typical names. Sure. I think it works very well, and even though you're used to... I have trouble remembering characters' names, and I feel like with this movie in particular, it kind of makes it a little easier, because it's okay, this person doesn't have a weird name, it's just blonde or pink or what have you. So that in itself, I think really helped me, and then obviously cutting and giving backstory to each character where we don't even necessarily have to know where in time we are, because it's still narratively moving forward very quickly. And I think that's something that, I don't know, I feel like you said, as a first director, it's hard to believe that he was able to really build these characters up so well. And obviously we have only one character or two characters know each other's names, but they all really come to terms and learn about these people by getting involved with it. And it all obviously comes to a head when we get Mr. Orange. Mr. Orange's character, played by Tim Roth, who really, from the beginning, and I'd like to go back. This is the kind of movie where towards the end, I always kind of forget exactly how it plays itself out at the end. And Tim Roth's character, I guess we're not worried about spoilers. I always dance around things here. But with what we learn about his character, seeing how he acts from the beginning and getting that backstory through different characters, and I'm blanking on Keitel's name now.
Mr. White.
How Mr. White and him kind of form a relationship, and I think it's kind of obliquely talked about how they talk about the Milwaukee Brewers, and it gets into this whole idea of how things that seem innocuous in the moment, if you go back and contextualize them from a future vantage point, they can be really meaningful, especially when you're in a certain type of situation. And I don't know if you guys exactly understand what I'm saying here, but I think it gets into, he uses the flashbacks to show how people get to know each other over time in a very interesting way, and how little details can really build up a character without saying, I'm Brian Dupree from so-and-so. I was born this year, and these are my likes. Like, through dialogue and through jumping back and forth in time and seeing in the past how these characters who you've already met and who've already shown themselves on screen, it gives information to how they react around each other. And I think it's really well done, and I'm not doing it nearly enough credit here, but hopefully you guys can piggyback.
It informs things that we have already seen. It adds more layers to things we've already observed. Like Reservoir Dogs is a very simple and straightforward script, right? Like, these guys perform a heist, the heist goes wrong, and then like we see what happens from there. I think Tarantino saw that, like, again, back to like budgetary reasons. Like he saw that he didn't have a lot of money to make it like a huge movie. And then realized that if he just rearranged some of the events, it made it narratively more interesting. Like, if we watched the film in chronological order, it wouldn't be as good a movie as it actually is, because the puzzle pieces are rearranged. You know, so like all the characters, everyone involved in Reservoir Dogs, are just as blind to these pieces of information as we are. Right? So they're trying to figure out who the rat is within the group, and the audience is in the same exact boat. And the characters are kind of learning the pieces of information as the audience is learning the pieces of the information, because of the way in which he decided to cut it together. And I think like films like Christopher Nolan's Memento, like rearranging the order in which pieces of the narrative take place, just makes it more interesting for the most part. And we're gonna see, like you said, Christian, like we're gonna see that a whole lot in Tarantino's films. Like, he does the same exact thing in Pulp Fiction. We get little vignettes in Inglourious Bastards. Like, he likes playing with time a whole lot.
See, you really helped to get to like me trying to understand what the hell I was even saying. So it makes me, to contrast, like something like Ocean's 11. Where we see like so straightforward, the gang's getting back together. Right. We're meeting this person. And not to bash Ocean's 11, I think that's a great movie as well. But this is so much more interesting narratively, and I appreciate you helping me out there, Chris.
No problem. I think you said it very eloquently yourself as well. So,
you know, I think there's a form of this movie that could have been made with the traditional, okay, they got to get the guys together. We learn about the characters' backstories. They get together. They do the heist. We see a really intense heist scene where things go wrong, and then we see the end play out just as it did, right? And I think there's a way that you make that film work. What's not only for budgetary reasons, but I think for tension reasons, it works just so well. I mean, the movie starts flash cut. A man is bleeding in a car, screaming for help.
Yeah.
You know, looks like he could die at any second. And the man that's driving the car, Mr. White, is trying to comfort him. And we're just thrown into that scenario. And that establishes Mr. White's kind of camaraderie and his kind of kinship with this character. And just it's little moves like that. And it's just starting it off like that. That really gives us a lot of insight. And then as it goes up, we start to see the disgusting undertones and how this thing came to be, and that there's untrustworthiness, and that even the cop character is someone unlikable. You know, it's so perfectly placed with how we get to know the characters, and then the situations that they're in, and then that tugs at our feeling for these characters. And I found myself, even these people are despicable in a lot of ways. By the end of the movie, the way that they play with hearing their stories and seeing it, and seeing how, like, for instance, like one of the most brilliant things is you hate Mr. Blonde, right? He's talked crap about when they're talking about the heist, and like that guy was a psychopath. And then you see him, and he's a psychopath, and he does psychopathic things. But then we see kind of his backstory, him coming out of prison, and then the Joe, the guy who organized the whole thing, and his son kind of taking care of him. And you see that they like him a lot. And you're like, well, that's, why do they like this guy? He's crazy, right?
You also see how loyal he is.
But then by the end of it, he's like, when he's dead, and you assume you have this tension in your heart, like, who's gonna care that he's dead? Oh, I guess Joe and the gang kind of liked him. When he's like, so you're telling me that he out of nowhere, after he did all this for our family, and like it's so crazy because you're like, that dude was just dancing around cutting off a cop's ear, and you're like, oh my God, this cop killed somebody that actually did something good, and did this family actually care? And it's so weird. It's so immoral, and it's messy, and it's very skillful that you can have those feelings. And it's crazy to watch summer blockbusters where we'll watch a main character throughout the entire thing and see them go through quote unquote, challenges and morally ambiguous things and have to learn something by the end, and feel absolutely nothing when someone close to them dies that we maybe have already expected it to. And it's a testament to how the style of writing was so dead simple, dead stupid simple. Like, it really is bare bones, but so effectively told and so intelligently told that we're able to get to these places with these seemingly despicable characters. And I think part of that is just the timing and how narratively everything is structured in a way that makes us learn more at the very moment that we should know more about these characters, that add to, not only is the plot simple but complex, and the way that we see shots complex, it still follows a very logical thought process, and can only come from the mind of someone who I deem probably an insane person.
So I mean, I would agree with you, Christian. Quentin Tarantino is eccentric. Let's say he's eccentric.
I think he's the most eccentric filmmaker.
I don't know if he's insane, but you
in like a really great way. Like, and if Tarantino, if you're listening, first of all, hey,
how you doing?
Huge fan, man. You're insane.
Thanks
in
for
all
tuning
the
in.
Things
Love your violence.
I love your I hate your dialogue. I love your violence.
You can say that he's insane or eccentric or whatever for kind of like putting these despicable people up on a pedestal. But I think when you look at it in the frame of being a part of the gang, like, for instance, he talks about the heroes and villains within the Reservoir Dogs. And he, in the interview that you sent us in our show notes, Christian, they mention how, like, he doesn't think that Tim Roth is actually the hero, when most people would think that because he's the cop, because he's the undercover cop, he is the hero, and that Mr. White is really like the true hero of the story. I think because he opens the movie up with just the gang sitting eating breakfast at a diner, like, they seem fairly normal. At this point, we don't even know that they're criminals. Like, it's very inclusive. So as an audience, you automatically feel like you're a part of the gang right from the get-go, which allows us to kind of skew our morality and view these criminals as heroes or villains or psychopaths, just as we would like regular people. Does that make sense? So, like, from the very beginning, he allows us to like twist our own morality, and have those feelings that you were talking about for these characters.
Absolutely.
And not worry about the fact that, oh, these characters have actually done terrible things.
And going back to, I agree completely, Chris. And going back to how we open on Keitel, being very much like this old school father figure who he views this guy as almost like a son, or I don't want to say like a dog, but he's treating him like a baby. He's like, he realizes that that Mr. Orange is in pain and that he can comfort him. And it's a real shame throughout, because as you were saying, it's kind of all about the trust. And the people who are faithful to the family, faithful to the group, and who stay within their role seem to, for the most part, as Buscemi would put it, be a professional. Those are the people in this lifestyle who survive. And it shows how the people who we can maybe relate to most do not come out positively in this world, unfortunately. It's like, it doesn't pay to trust these people deeply. It pays to keep your mouth shut and to know only what you need to know.
Right.
And there's really something, amoral about that, and speaks to the relationships in this underworld that he's showing us, I think.
So to kind of branch off, I always see this. I want to point out a narrative. For some reason, in a lot of artists that I like, I can see the analogy to making the art that they're in, kind of a self-commentary. And what I found really striking about our main one of our what's perceivably the main character, which is Tim Roth's character, Mr. Orange, is that he's kind of dying throughout the whole film. Like the whole film is him dying, and we get flashbacks to how he got to that point and how he became a cop. And it really struck me as a commentary on writing a good main character. The scenes where I really do want to shout out Randy Brooks, who is the cop who's teaching him how to be undercover. And he's telling him how to tell a story. And I find that so engaging on so many levels of Tarantino kind of this being one of the first films he's going to make, this commentary on how to convince people that what you're doing is real and take them to another place and convince everybody that you're the character you say you are. And this really, this good breakdown on filmmaking and acting in general, and seeing it develop. And just that, I think a real high point for me is the cutting between him learning the story, him telling the story, and then the story being filmed in an actual thing that exists. And I found
Being
this
real.
like,
Puts us there. It's so fucking good. I apologize for language, but it's.
I completely agree.
but I found that, I love seeing that. I've said how Inception was this analogy for filmmaking, and I really did see the Tim Roth character as an analogy for making a story and sticking to it, and living with the repercussions of what you've created, for good, for better and for worse.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That is the building block of the movie, and it's what I love about Tarantino. We'll definitely talk about it with Pulp Fiction, but in so many of his movies, he'll just have these scenes where it feels like you're getting a peek behind the writing process, or just like getting tidbits of knowledge dropped in. And I think this is one of the best uses of it. So the fact that this is his first movie, and it builds to us literally, we see him telling the story to Joe and nice guy Eddie, and we see him in the scenes he's talking about, and get that incredible 360 shot around him where we are in that bathroom, inside the story, inside the movie. And it's really, I'm just getting chills when you describing it. I feel like I'm just taking away from it now, because it's so perfect.
It's
great.
definitely great storytelling, especially when Randy Brooks is telling him, like, if you're going to live this story, if you're going to be a part of this story, you need to know every single detail about that bathroom. Like, do the stalls have doors on them? Are you using paper towels, or are you using hand dryers? And Tarantino even like freezes on a lot of the details, like when Tim Roth goes to turn on the hand dryer, like there's a freeze frame there where it's like Tim Roth is living that story, even though it's a false story. And again, I'm butchering it. Christian said it way more eloquently, but it's one of the best sequences in the whole film.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to general thoughts and opinions. Maybe some of our favorite things about the movie, where we think it stands. Any critiques on the movie? Let's kind of start with that. I'd be excited to hear if you were to critique this film on any level. What would you point out?
So the one thing in my most recent watch of this, before I rewatched it for this episode, I showed this to my dad for the first time. I recently, a couple years ago, got him a bunch of Tarantino movies because we had watched Pulp Fiction together, and he really enjoyed that. So I was like, all right, I'm giving my dad the deep dive into Quentin Tarantino. So we sat down to watch Reservoir Dogs with my 21-year-old sister and my dad, and it just hops right into the Like a Virgin segment. So the one thing about this movie is, like, if you are uncomfortable watching movies with family, do not watch this movie with your family. And it's not the movie's fault. It's my fault completely. I will take full credit, but it's the kind of thing where the scene is so hilarious and absurd, and I could barely contain my laughter watching this with my family. And my dad literally turns midway through this scene. He's like, "Good thing we're watching this with your sister." I was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, Dad." Aside from that, yeah, it's hard to find flaws. I mean, obviously through the lens of 2019, these characters are generally despicable in how they talk about race, and they use a lot of slurs.
But they're also
interestingly-
despicable in the sense that they cut people's ears off, right? Like, right?
Right.
They're,
No,
like,
of course,
it's
of course.
a trait
Just
of their
all around.
despicability.
I think action on screen is something that people today are very used to and comfortable with in a way they're still not willing to accept the racial elements of our society, you know? So it maybe forces you to come to terms with that in a way. But with that being said, there's also a scene where they're talking about, and this gets into sexual objectification as well, but all of these characters agree that there's multiple black women who they're like, oh my God, this woman is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. And talking about, in a questionable manner, how they will put up with less than other types of women and things like that. So it's like strangely, I wouldn't say progressive, but it kind of, it makes you question, like, okay, like how do these guys have this cognitive dissonance here? You know, it's so obvious.
Also, I will point out a really interesting economic breakdown of waitress of
Unbelievable.
servers. Just
That's
breaking down-
progressive. That is progressive.
when he breaks down that, serving is the number one profession of a single mother. Like, it's like, where did this person take economics? And like, it's amazing.
Guy's been in a lot of diners.
I'm telling you that I love that part for me.
No,
felt
it's
very. I love data driven. Breakdowns.
Dialogue.
Just any conversation about an economic statistic that is important to understand and grasp.
That
Side
whole
note.
opening scene is fantastic because of it's full of breakdowns. It's full of the breakdown of like a virgin. It's full of the why Buscemi doesn't tip. Like Quentin Tarantino doesn't care about like moving the story forward. He just wants to have these like regular everyday conversations that you would have, with your buds.
And I'll point out that there's a lot of character. There's a moment for every one of those characters that makes sense for what transpires.
Yes, absolutely.
You get that moment with Mr. Blonde, which is really creepy. And when you've seen the movie, there's a point where he points his gun and goes "Pow," like that, and you're like,
The guy's just squirming. Okay, wait, no, we're talking about a different scene, maybe. Yeah.
Not the point where he points his gun at the actual police officer. The one
Okay,
when they're
yeah.
talking around the table and he points out a finger gun.
That's right.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
do you
like,
want me
I'm
to
gonna
shoot
shoot
this
you.
guy? Yeah.
Yeah, and then he's like, and then like in his soul, you're like, oh, he's imagining shooting him dead and feeling what that gives him. Like he wants to actually go through with that. And then I'm actually going to give credit where credit's due. Like I said, the Jack's movie reviews on YouTube, it's really, really great retrospective on the entire film. And it's definitely a great watch after this podcast. You should go see it. You know, he points out that Steve Buscemi's like tip conversation is kind of why he's one of the best actual criminals, because he's like he's completely practical of like, why would I like, he doesn't feel like he owes anybody anything. He paid what he needed to pay and he's going to leave. Right. And why would you give a tip? Unless it was very, very special, he would give a tip, right? Unless it was absolutely
6
extraordinary.
cups filled of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's a very like measured, practical man of like, oh, society tells me to do this thing. Society tells me not to be a criminal, but I don't care. Like I'm going to be a criminal and make money. Like he has this disregard for a norm.
It's very pragmatic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sticks with his character throughout. Yeah, and then Tim Roth says is just kind of reacting and doesn't really have his own unique voice during that entire opening scene. He's kind of just reacting to everybody and trying to fit in, right? Any other Chris? Do you have any critiques?
This doesn't make for very good listening, but like this is such a good movie. Like there's nothing in the editing that I would change. There's nothing in the acting or the writing that I would change. There's nothing in the pacing that I would change. I think this is almost a perfect film.
I do too. I think
it's not.
I think it's
3
almost
hours
perfect.
long.
Yeah.
It's perfect. What could we possibly change to make this movie better?
I got something.
All right, throw it on us.
You know I'm the accent man. Tim Roth's American accent is pretty spotty and is the worst part of the movie, in my opinion, from like really diving deep into it. Tim Roth is an English actor. In case you didn't notice by the way he says words very strangely in this entire film. There's one point that I picked out in particular to point out to I watched this film with my girlfriend, and I pointed this out. There's a point where he's like, what happens if it goes longer? He says longer or something like that. And he's kind of in this like LA cool guy kind of accent, but it's just kind of, it's a little wonky. He's like, so I'm telling this guy, right? And then he goes from like a New York to a West Coast to weird European in the diphthongs, the vowel diphthongs that he just can't. I think that are just a little foreign to him. It's a little rough. If you listen under a microscope, which I was during this listening, and I've always thought it was a little weird. I always thought his character sounded weird, but really diving deep into the way his character sounds, I think that's the most distracting part of the movie, which is you're not American. But to be fair,
I agree with you. Like I think it's and granted, during this scene, he's under duress, but the scene in which he's talking to the cop, and the cop is being a baby about getting his ear chopped off, and like there he is just talking to another cop who's
Such a
literally
pansy.
bleeding out. And like you can tell Tim Roth is trying to be very level-headed and like trying to talk the guy down and like inform him as to what's going on, but this guy just won't stop effing talking about him being disfigured and what he's done to him. And then finally Tim Roth is just like, I am dying. Like in that moment you can tell that his accent is fluctuating.
Come on, I need you to hold on. This cop's waiting, moving a block away.
What the f*** are they waiting for? This fucking guy slashes my face and he cuts my fucking ear off. I'm fucking deformed. F*** you! F*** you! I'm fucking dying here! I'm fucking dying!
Not to make a move till Joe Cabot shows up. We'll send him to get him. All right? Now you heard him. They said he's on his way. Don't pussy out of me now, Martin. We're just gonna sit here and bleed. Joe Cabot sticks his fucking head through that door.
And like I said, he's in duress in the scenes. Like I can't fault him for that, being an English actor. Like I'm sure it's tough to maintain the accent when emotions are high.
Yeah, other than
But it's
the
noticeable.
accent, and this is what carries this, and makes it not distracting and a non-talking point on most coverage I've seen of it. Like most people don't comment on this, and I don't think it's that big of a deal.
No, not at all.
Because his performance is excellent. Like, we said that this is kind of like a play. And I really watched it the whole time. I was like, dude, if I like ever am down and out and I want to do like community theater, I'm gonna do Reservoir Dogs, the play. Like,
dude,
it'd be
I
so
would love
fun.
to see Reservoir Dogs as a stage play.
There's so many moments when you just see that any character would want to be like Marlon Brando, just going for the big like, why? There's so many. It's not that cheesy, but there's so many of those moments that just you'd really want to chew up. So I'd love to do Reservoir Dogs, the play.
Truth be told, last week you mentioned, Christian, how we took acting class together.
Yeah.
And when Tim Roth is rehearsing his story, watching him reminded me so much of us having to like memorize monologues and get get the blocking down and like the tempo of the monologue and like make it seem as natural as possible. Like, it very much reminded me of what we used to have to do.
Absolutely.
So I thought that was funny.
So I don't know. I think we may have talked about this on a previous episode, offhandedly maybe. But Tarantino has talked about how after he does, if he stops doing films after 10, he's talked about how he's been interested in writing screenplays for plays. I don't know if they're called screenplays. No, I guess they wouldn't be screenplays. They would just be plays.
Stage plays.
Stage plays. But that makes perfect sense given where he's come. And we didn't talk about it in the beginning, but I think The Hateful Eight is definitely him coming back to this type of writing and shooting, and that's something else that I think would lend itself very well to the stage. Not stagecoach though.
Wow.
Oh man, Brian
Nailed
just
it.
cracked himself up.
That's great, man. I'm really proud of you.
All right, I'll take my leave. Thanks, guys. Stage
that's
left.
great. I'm trying to stretch. Anything else, guys? Anything else on Reservoir Dogs? Reservoir to me also, other than rendezvous, is the most French word that I know.
Okay. Something that the whole movie I was trying to...
Okay,
I'm going to ignore that. All right. I'm going to ignore that outburst of Asperger's.
The French get consistently bashed on this podcast.
Brian is, of course,
probably fair.
a French American, and as
Partially,
such,
yeah.
is disrespected by the fact that I only know rendezvous and reservoir.
No, you probably know more than I do, so I'm the real disrespectful one here. But I'm sorry, derailed. I don't know if you guys noticed this. The whole movie, and because there's so few set pieces in this, I was trying to figure out what was under the sheath in the warehouse the whole time. And I think it's a hearse. Did you guys see the hearse that is in the back of the?
Yes.
Okay.
So
No, I didn't remember that.
Little production history.
Okay.
The warehouse that they're in is actually a morgue. Like they shot
okay.
in a morgue, and then the apartment that Tim Roth is in is one of the facilities above the morgue that they dressed like an apartment. So I suppose
Yeah, it was so great because they put it up as if he just moved in,
Right,
Because they've got like a step ladder and paint brushes and stuff. But it was really like, what's the best way to like make a apartment that isn't an apartment? Oh, he just moved in and he's painting.
he's undercover.
Brilliant.
He just moved in. It makes total sense. But yeah, I mean, Brian, it could have been a hearse since they were shooting in a morgue.
I just thought like from like a subconscious symbolism level, and I was like focusing on it. It's like, okay, we're working towards this crazy thing. Tim Roth's dying the whole time. The fact that it's in a morgue is just too perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing behind them is like an incinerator.
Yeah. I mean, like within the story, it's not a morgue, but like the location that they shot at was.
Yeah. Very cool. Any last thoughts, guys? Go watch this
If
movie.
you haven't,
If
seen Reservoir Dogs and you're of age, I would watch this movie.
Or if you've seen it, I know not. We're big film nerds. Like we love this stuff. Like this is what we live and breathe, and we love revisiting this kind of thing and whatnot. But I know a lot of people don't watch. When we were kids, we'd watch like a movie a million times in a row. And I don't think it's worth it for a lot of films that we've seen. But I can't recommend enough. Even if you've seen Reservoir Dogs a couple times and it's been years, revisit it. It's great. Like you'll forgot nuanced parts. I mean, I remember I forgot a lot of the big moments that really impacted me. Like the point where, and if you haven't seen the movie in a while, cut this off. Thanks for being here. I don't want to spoil things that actually you probably forgot. But there's a moment when Tim Roth accidentally like shoots a lady, and I forgot that he did that, and that added so much depth to the moral ambiguity of him as a criminal, and him really being reckoning with that, and knowing that like
you can see the remorse on his face.
Yeah, and he's dying the whole movie knowing that he killed a lady.
Yeah,
as a cop, right? And that really surprised me. I forgot that was a point of contention, right? That happened. Yeah. So revisit this movie. It's incredible. Like it really is one of my favorites, and I think by far one of the easiest to recommend for starting if you're new to Tarantino or relatively new to his back catalog.
I hope that all of you loyal listeners actually go back and watch Tarantino's catalog along with us for the next month and a half.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, you might enjoy our episodes more if you just recently watched the film that we're talking about.
We're going in relatively chronological order, if I'm not mistaken, and
for the most part.
Yeah, so our next week's going to be Pulp Fiction. Chris, you're not going to be here.
I will not.
But then we'll be going through Jackie Brown, Glorious Bastards, Once Upon a Time, and into his new film, Once Upon. Oh God, that comes out! Oh my God,
Yes, we're so close.
It just hit me that he's coming out with a new movie. I didn't even mention this the entire time. That's why we're doing it, folks. That's why we're doing the Tarantino month. Oh my God, why did I blank on that? I'm a terrible host. Pop-O-Holics. Yeah, that's why we're doing Tarantino. Jesus Christ, what is wrong with me? Get my head examined. Cool, guys. Well, again, thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for listening. We have more Tarantino coming your way. Again, rate and review us. Join us on Facebook, the Instagram, the Twitters. A lot of cool stuff going on there. So for me and everybody in the Pop-O-Holics staff, have a great week.
Thanks for listening.
Consume consciously.
Bye!